There's one.
Which is a good thing.
1 minute. According to the clock on the
That's
wall,
something
I
new.
believe it is 6:33, and I'm going to call the meeting of the Tilton Planning Board for Tuesday, September 23rd to order. And first on the agenda is Planning Board Case 1414. It's a continuation of the site plan review proposal to add an indoor fitness center to the upper level of the facility and expand hours of operation from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. at 100 Autumn Drive in the Rural Agricultural District, R6/10-2.
Actually, yeah, I guess you should. Thank you, yeah.
He's gonna officially recuse himself.
I'm going to recuse myself from this case.
Not just, I'm gonna go over there.
All right. The request has been made to continue this case, I believe.
Is that right, Mr. Pyra?
Yes, we would like to continue this case.
To the October 14th planning board meeting, I believe.
Yes, October 14th.
All right, and I have a motion on the floor to accept the continuation to October 14th. Is there a second?
Yes.
And a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So be it. You may come back to the table. Before I introduce our speaker tonight, whom I have not met, because Dari didn't introduce him to me, and I'm dealing with computer issues, I think it's a smart idea to talk about some information we received today with some follow-up, because it probably will prevent us from getting into a lot of discussion once we hear from our guest speaker. All of you have in front of you a copy of a Superior Court ruling and Dari sent this to us. Did everybody have a chance to read through it?
Yes, several times.
Okay. And this is a very recent case, 8/13/2014. And I believe, with few exceptions, it could read the person who's bringing it versus the town of Tilton.
Nah.
I think that's a stretch.
Yeah,
Well,
me too.
Close. I mean, it's basically what it's saying that is that the law, the rules and regulations in our zoning ordinances are not legal.
That's not what it's saying.
Well, that's how I interpret it. No? Okay, we'll discuss that later, but that's how I see it. We can't regulate, we as a local municipality do not have the power to regulate forestry in any way, the cutting of timber.
It's right in the RSA's.
Yes, it's in the RSA's. It was brought before the, and I think that Dari can enlighten you more on what came up this afternoon, that after this and after the RSA's, the state of New Hampshire Senate made no changes whatsoever. They didn't see it as a concern and didn't see that the local municipality should have the right to make any changes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would word it slightly differently, but yeah, I mean, I think the gist of what you're saying is exactly right. When the RSA, shoot, I don't have my handout in front of me, the number, but basically where it says planning boards don't have the authority to regulate forestry activities unless there's a subdivision and site plan review. The judge looked at the record when that was before the Senate and saw that, in fact, the overlap between forestry operations and wetlands crossings does exist. It comes up a lot, and nonetheless, they intentionally did not carve out any sort of special exception for that. So in other words, the legislature contemplated it, and they decided that they wanted to stick with the language that they had.
That was,
Or they wanted to go with the language that was before them.
that was the opinion of the presiding justice.
Well, this is now
He
law.
was very clearly
No, that's not
citing, he
law.
was very clearly
That's Superior
citing.
Court.
Well, it's the.
The judge was very clearly citing the legislative record, so it wasn't, it was, I mean, his reporting on what they talked about, it wasn't his own opinion. I mean,
Yeah, but you
maybe,
misquoted him.
If you look
I
on
wasn't
page.
quoting him.
If you-
I wasn't
if you
quoting
look on-
anything.
If you look on page 3 of this ruling, it specifically says the powers of the municipal planning board, more specifically, are set forth in RSA chapter 674, RSA 674:1, 6, and the support, that was in 2013, was amended in 2011 to add a sentence clarifying the planning board's ability to regulate timber harvesting operations. This is RSA, not the, in general, the planning board may be given such powers by the municipality as may be necessary to enable it to fulfill its functions, promote municipal planning, or carry out the purposes of this title. Such powers shall not include regulating timber harvesting operations that are not part of a subdivision application or a development project subject to the site plan review under this chapter. That's pretty clear to me. No?
Okay. How about if we listen to the speaker rather than have our
Yeah, right, exactly.
argumentative discussion?
Jane was hoping to make an
Contradictory
introductory
discussion.
Yeah, I
topic,
was
but we
hoping to
wouldn't
make
let
an
her.
introduction, and obviously that's impossible to
walked
do with
into?
this board. So Jason,
You're
I haven't
queen
met
bee
you.
there, Catherine.
Hi,
I don't wanna
Jason,
get
I haven't
stung.
met you, I'm Jane Alden, this is Judy Tilton. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves? Jason is, you can tell us exactly what your title is, because I'm not really sure what it
Okay.
is.
I'm Director of the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association. And, well, I can tell you give you a little introduction of who we are. And we're the state's forest landowner and forest industry membership trade association. We have 1,400 members, about 2/3 of them are timberland owners, and it ranges up from small tree farms up to commercial ownership. Our members collectively across the state own about 1 million acres, own and manage about 1 million acres of timberland. We do 3 things. We do advocacy and lobbying work. That's what I do a fair amount of. We also do education and training for loggers, foresters, landowners. And we also do outreach and education as well. Dari had invited me to come and speak with you about the issue of timber harvesting. There was a particular timber sale in town that got some attention up on School Street that kind of got the ball rolling. The individual is, I was told, I don't know if you had heard, was,
Otherwise detained?
he's otherwise detained,
For
yes.
about 12 years,
I don't know how long, but
12
he's.
months.
12 months.
We're just trying to decide what
And
facility.
I guess
has them.
I want to kind of back up here. You know, our association, we promote forest management. We promote timber harvesting and sustainable forest management. We also recognize landowners' rights and landowners' right to manage their property. Our kind of a central tenet of our association is that timberland, we want to see more timberland in the state. If owning timberland, if we can keep reasonable tax policy, reasonable regulatory burden, and healthy markets, people will grow trees. It's an economic, it's very simple economics. As I've said before, if growing trees was wildly profitable, people would buy strip malls, raise them, and put in tree farms. I mean, they did it for sheep, they would do it for timber. Having said that, you know, we promote forestry. We also promote sensible regulations. The individual that we had talked about earlier was, I don't want to say victim, but I guess, victim of a bill that we had supported, that created what's called a repeat offender. It's kind of like your drivers, if you can't get your foot off the pedal, your fines ratchet up until finally at some point you end up in jail. Well, we promoted and passed legislation a number of years ago to do that for forestry regulations and to get some of these frequent flyers, and well, we've got our first customer. Having said that, we also promoted the bill that made this change to the planning board duties and responsibility. What we observed across the state is some confusion about where does a planning board duties responsibility end. We've looked at this and our council has reviewed it. I have a memo from our council that, although it's somewhat in the context of the Hampton court case, Superior Court decision, it does have applicability to all ordinances. Although you could say, well, Hampton is a Superior Court case specific to Rockingham County, the legislation that is specified on page 3 is the law of the land. We had that sentence in particular put into law to clarify this. We did it with the municipal association. They testified that the duty or the regulation of forestry is part, if it is to occur, it's going to be part of site plan review or a subdivision. Right now, there are 3 state agencies that regulate timber harvesting in the state. DES, Department of Resources, Recreation and Development, the Forest Rangers, which is a division of forest land, and of course DRA, the taxes. And then the towns have input. Certainly there's the linkages with the town as it relates to taxes and timber taxation. So there's I guess the point is there's plenty of folks looking over landowners, loggers, and foresters' shoulder as they operate in the woods. Despite the change that was made, and I think it was in '06 to the law, there persisted ordinances out on the landscape in towns and communities that and wetlands is one example. There are communities that want to regulate ridge lines, deer yards. Can't harvest in a deer yard. You can't harvest above a certain elevation. Riparian areas. I mean, so wetlands is a common one that we saw, and so we wanted to make sure that there was clarity in the law. Innovative land use control is frequently pointed to because you can create innovative land use ordinances for environmental characteristics. That's pretty wide open, what's an environmental characteristic. And so in our attorney, when you look at the rest of that law, it deals with impact fees and really doesn't get into the issue of timber harvesting. And so although we've looked at it and we said, look, environmental characteristics, that's a stretch. Furthermore, so again, that's what led us to pursue this legislation and to try to draw this clarity. We had been, Mr. Ron and Nancy Bottom in Hampton had a timber sale. They filed an intent to cut. The town signed the intent to cut. The logger went in, started to create a log landing. This is a retired, they're retired folks. They needed income. It's around 30 acres. It's rather typical timberland. It's not an Indian burial ground. It's not some pristine primeval forest. It's very similar to what's around here. The logger got a call from the town saying, look, you've got to file a wetlands permit. You need to hire a certified soil scientist, get a wetlands map, notify your abutters, and provide an erosion control plan and a harvest plan to the town. Not unlike your ordinance. And Ron and Nancy said, look, we don't believe that that's the case. For my 30 acres, for me to go out and hire a wetland scientist and do all this, why would I even bother cutting my wood? The economics aren't there. if I'm gonna do a project, I'll probably just develop the land at this point, call a developer up and figure out, if I can't manage it for forestry, that's not an economic situation, and I'll just call the developer up, because that's, and of course Hampton is a very fast-growing area. And again, that's an illustration of how the economics come into this scenario. So Ron hired an attorney, they looked at it, the way it worked, by the time they had kind of reviewed it, the tax year had passed, so they said, well, we didn't harvest, so we better file another intent to cut. Town signed the intent to cut, and they were getting ready to go, and the town said, hold on. And by this time, the council in the town had changed. They said, no, we need this permit. And again, they filed a third intent to cut, because again, the tax year, this is going on a while, and the town refused to sign it. Why that's significant is if you look in Justice Delker's decision, there's a writ of mandamus that says, look, you town have to sign this intent to cut. There's only 3 reasons why an intent to cut cannot be signed. It's not because of a permit, it's not because of a road bond, it's not because of a driveway permit. You have to be current on your taxes. Owners of record all the owners of record have had to sign it. And it has to be correctly completed. Those are the 3 reasons. It can't be because of a non-tax issue. So at this point, Ron and Nancy said, look, felt like they had been pushed around enough, and he said, I'm willing to go to the mat on this. They tried to negotiate with the town, they tried to work with the town and said, look, can we work through this somehow to what is it you need? And the town was insistent, we need these things. And Ron says, I can't afford to do that. And so, and the interesting thing about this particular case is there's no facts in dispute. It was a bench decision, meaning there wasn't a jury. Both parties came in, the town and Ron and Nancy, and said, here's the facts. We all agree on the facts of this case. That the intents were filed, this is the property on, and yes, there's wetlands on the property. I happen to walk the property. There's evidence of past forest management there. Common misconception is that wetlands do not grow timber. If you look at the definition of a wetland, there's 3 things that define a wetland. Hydrology, the type of plant, and the presence of water. There are many soils and many tree species, merchantable tree species, that will grow in wetlands. If you follow best management practices, you can harvest those. Red maple is a classic example of a tree that likes wet roots. And so when Ron looked at this, and part of his evaluation is they said, look, you can't harvest in the wetland or within a certain buffer distance of it. He said, all right, even if I complied with that, I have a postage stamp that I could harvest it. So the justice was very clear and very plain in his language. You've read it. Said, look, well, RSA plainly states planning boards don't have this regulatory authority unless it's part of site plan review and or subdivision. Furthermore, the town, you as an administrative function, need to sign that intent to cut. Essentially, he satisfied the requirements. You can't withhold that because of something else over here that you don't like or don't agree with. Yes, it's a Rockingham County decision. The town has decided not to appeal it. The decision came down on August 13th. It hasn't been appealed. I think, my read on it is it's such a firm decision. Why would you? It was very unambiguous what was said. So when I look at the Tilton ordinance and I look at kind of review the Tilton ordinance, and I have to, but for the purpose of full disclosure, and I know Catherine knows this, I am a Tilton resident. I own 40 acres. Some of it I put a conservation easement on with the town of Tilton within the last couple years up on Perkins Road. I actually have 1.2 acres in the town of Sanderton, so I get my $1 tax bill from the town of Sanderton as well. So I know this, I live it. I do forestry and timber stand improvement work on my property. My son and I sugar. We cut firewood. I've had timber sales on my property. Interestingly enough, I think I did a sale, my last sale was in 2007. We filed an intent to cut. I hired Adam Mock. I had a forester come in, mark the wood. I had Adam Mock, a local logger from the Warner area, who's also respected, I guess not that local, but from the Warner area. He and his son came over and did the sale. There's wetlands on my property. I was kind of surprised to learn about this ordinance after the fact. I know the tape is running, and I hope I don't get indicted somehow here, but we never knew. And what frequently happens is these ordinances will get passed, they'll sit on the books. Usually there's an incident or something may trigger the passage of this. It may sit on the books, administrations change, people come and go, and then something happens, a timber sale. We'll just pick School Street again for an example. This timber sale occurs and someone dusts off the ordinance and says, wait a minute, I think we got something on the books about that. And that's how these things bubble back up. The Tilton ordinance, though, when I read through it, the parallels to Hampton are pretty similar. There are some pieces of the Tilton ordinance that I, as someone who grows forest products and owns land in Tilton, there are pieces of it that I look at and I just say mechanically they don't work. I don't understand it. And how I think there are pieces of it that would make compliance almost impossible. I don't know if you want to get into the details of that here tonight or whether you want to talk bigger picture about just primacy and regulatory authority, but when I read through it, there are pieces of it that I just look at and say, I need a conditional use permit for this, but I don't for that, yet they're kind of the same thing. Who decides? There's a lot of mays or shoulds, but not shalls in it. And I look at that and say, all right, if I ever wanted to do a timber sale again, how would I even begin to comply with this thing? I brought some information with me. I'm kind of here as on an informational basis at Dari's request. I did bring some information with me. I brought a copy. We do classes and workshops on timber harvesting laws. Where we invite in forest rangers, DES, BRA, and they talk about all the different aspects of it. And I brought a copy of it's a manual. I brought one not for everyone. Guide up to. I also should mention we have members who are paper mills, so we love to hand out paper documents.
Some of us have that, actually.
Yeah,
we have that.
Okay, do you already?
have it.
All right, so that's a publication we put out in conjunction with Extension. Then
It's quite a good publication, by the way.
No, I have something from,
I think that's what isn't that
Yeah.
that's what you have, Kathy, that's
no,
what
I
I
have two different things.
Okay, well,
We
we handed,
have that.
we handed
No,
out.
I
I
have
have another one.
You have
You have
this.
I
that
have
too.
that, I don't have this.
Yeah, you do.
No, I don't.
Anyway, we've circulated
I have
both
that.
of them,
Okay,
but
so
thank you very much.
all right,
It's,
so I-
if
Maybe in my
folks need
computer.
it, yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
can.
And then a hard
So the way the timber harvesting laws work, and this is another question that comes up, is they'll say, well, with respect to wetlands, you have what's called a logger or a forester or a landowner has to follow best management practices. Aren't they voluntary? So what? Can you just skid down the brook? What isn't that voluntary? And the answer is no. When it comes to water quality and sedimentation, the answer is no. They are in rule, they are in law. The way best management practices work is they're kind of outcome based. In other words, you let the land manager, the logger, the landowner, the forester decide what's best. It's not prescriptive prescriptive in the point that it's gonna say, you have to put a water bar or a diversion ditch every 50 feet up that slope. It says, use these, but use your discretion. Each site's different, and so as well as slopes, soils, and vegetation types. So, I had this conversation in the town of Sharon earlier this year. Best management practices for water quality and erosion control, they do have the force of law, and as we've seen, and we most recently saw, people wind up in jail if you screw up. There are cops out there that do this.
Big enough, though. Big enough.
Well,
Have you walked on the school street?
I've driven
operation?
by it. I haven't been back there. I've seen some of his handiwork elsewhere. I'm sure it's comparable. I had a chance to see sculptured rocks for his
Oh, did you?
handiwork. So, point being though, is we've taken the law, we've tightened that up so that if you are a frequent flyer, you're gonna basically, and I've had conversations with the state forester, you're going to have your privilege or right to practice timber cutting revoked or removed. And that's kind of where things are headed here. So, anyway, I did bring a copy. Well, you have copies of the laws. I'm sure Dari's gotten the RSA's. Dari, I'm kind of rambling at this point.
No,
What
no.
else do you want?
No, this is good. I mean, perhaps, I don't know, Chairman Alden, do you?
I'd be
Do you-
interested in hearing what Jason feels about our ordinance. I mean, it's always, I think, valuable when somebody
Yeah,
with his
and
knowledge
if you
looks
have
at this
those,
type of ordinance and goes, whoa, I see problems with it, because I believe, wasn't it Conservation
I believe
Commission
that's what
that
he said.
primarily
Some
wrote this?
problems.
Mechanically, I mean, I'll just preface this by saying fundamentally, I think the chairman's assessment is correct. You could white out Hampton and put in Tilton. The parallels between this ordinance, Catherine, we can disagree, but the parallels between this ordinance and Hampton's are very similar. And, we can disagree on that, but the law is, I don't know how it could be any clearer. Planning boards just don't have, unless it's site plan review or a subdivision. I mean, that's what Delker got at, Justice Delker. It's there.
That's what I see too. It would be helpful, this is a good time for you to be here, because right now, we're looking at going through the ordinances and making changes at this next town meeting. And so if you would point out the ones that you were referring to that you see as issues, we can look at those further. And we can discuss those now, but we will certainly look at those further as we move down the road.
Could I just mention, the only question is if we're going to make, if the planning board has a question before it and it may make the decision to remove the ordinance, how much time should we actually spend picking through the ordinance?
Because we're not talking about removing the entire ordinance,
Just the logging elements of it,
perhaps.
and then at that point,
Well, that's why I thought it would be helpful if Jason
Okay.
referred to those ordinances that he sees as possible problems and in conflict with this court ruling. That's what I was asking you to do. I don't expect us to change it tonight or debate it tonight. I just wanted to know we can do that at a later time, but that would be helpful to the planning board, I believe.
I just want to add that, in being the one who was corresponding with Jason for this meeting, I did sort of indicate to him that the focus of our discussion would be on just the overall legality of it. So I just don't want to, I wouldn't want to put him on the spot to ask him to pick out specific pieces of the ordinance if he indeed isn't necessarily prepared.
Well,
That
he
would
alluded
be
to
my-
the fact.
Okay,
I
that's
mean,
fine.
I
guess.
brought it up because you alluded
That's
to the
fine.
fact that you
Yeah,
had
I mean, I
looked at it.
guess my point is, I think the ordinance, as it relates to timber harvesting, because I think there's some good stuff in here
Yeah.
to development and structures. And I think but as it relates to timber harvesting, And I would argue agriculture, I know you do farming, are any of your fields within 100 feet of a wetland? Because by definition, if you tilled or had an agricultural activity, you would have to get a conditional use permit. I mean, this is...
No, my brother would have more problems than me.
Yeah, okay. But my point is, when
Well,
we...
no, wait a minute,
when we-
across the street.
When we read this, when you read this though, and that's the problem with laws and ordinances, is they're, as they say, they're very blunt instruments. They're very blunt instruments. And so when I read this, I can give you reasons why the timber harvesting is just, it doesn't work. And much of it also applies to agriculture. And I'm not talking agricultural structures, I'm talking tillage, any type of soil disturbance. So anyway, you know, when the first thing that I encountered is, it really begins on page 4, at the bottom, at the table, you know, for uses for wetlands in the conservation districts. It says tree farming using best management practices in order to protect streams from damage to prevent sedimentation. That's a permitted use. All right. Now, what is tree farming? And that's a question that I would have if let's say I'm getting ready to do another timber sale on my property, which I have some areas, and talking to my forester, this is something we'll probably be looking at in the next 5 years. And I said, all right, Tilton Planning Board, I want to be a good doobie, I want to comply with this. I'm not a certified tree farm, but I have a management plan. In fact, it's under a conservation easement that you folks hold. But I'm not a certified tree farmer under the American Tree Farm Federation. And I'm going to use best management practices, obviously they're law. Is that a permitted use? Or do I get kicked into, on page 5, at the very bottom, agriculture and logging? On page 5, this is again in the table. There's an inherent conflict there. Now, if you wanted to improve your ordinance, an easy fix would be, instead of tree farming, put tree farming, logging, and agriculture using best management practices is a permitted use. Fixed. You have to use these anyway. They're law. It doesn't put you in the spot where you're now, and that was another question, is who enforces some of this? I mean, right now you have rangers, you have DES, wetland scientist folks, you have people out there that are certified, licensed, and educated in this. This is a question that towns frequently, I ask the town, say, who, is Catherine going to come out, or is the chairman going to come out and look at my pole ford and my culvert installed and say, yeah, that's good, or geez, I think you should put some more brush over here, or why do you use pine and not popple for that? I mean, this is, so again, an easy fix would be tree farming, logging, and agriculture using best management practices would be a permitted use. Again, because otherwise, I do a timber sale on my property, do I need, if I read this, it's a logging operation. Now, if I cut firewood for my own personal consumption, is that a logging operation? I have an outdoor boiler, I burn about 12 quarts a year. Is that, I'm going to be sugaring, I'll probably burn another quart or two. Is that considered logging? I pick it up with my pickup truck, or I use my neighbor's tractor. Do I have to get a conditional use permit? I have a field that I'm trying to bring back, some of that pasture. I've got some pines along the edge of it that are shading it, and I'm growing Christmas trees out there. I'm within 100 feet of a wetland. Again, I know the tape is running. I'm in 100 feet of a wetland. I plant Christmas trees out there. Is that should I be getting a conditional use permit? Following best management practices. Yeah, again, easy fix, tree farming, agriculture and logging following BMPs is a permitted use. And I would say ditch, agriculture and logging operations, conditional use permit. And the reason is then do reference the BMPs on page 6. Page 7. Page 7 is where things start to get pretty interesting. All construction, forestry, and agricultural activities, this is 14.4.5. All construction, forestry, and agricultural activities within 100 feet of any wetland shall be undertaken with special care to avoid erosion, sedimentation of the wetlands. All right, when deemed necessary, a sedimentation and erosion control plan may be required. So, what's the standard for requiring this? And who makes that determination? You know, it's at the discretion of the planning board. You know, hiring a soil scientist to come out, survey my property or walk it, there is an expense to that. But, you know, the obvious question is, again, that would be, I would say 14.4.5, I would remove that. Again, I think you got it covered if you're following BMPs. Obviously, BMPs hit erosion control and sedimentation. Page 8. This again, you folks would approve the conditional use permit. This gets back to the fundamental question. I'm having to come to you to obtain a conditional permit to harvest merchantable timber on my property. Justice Delker was clear on that. I won't keep beating that horse. Page 9. Case by case, the planning board may authorize by rule or on a case-by-case bid administrative procedure for conditional use permits. And then they may be issued for ag and logging. Again, what's the standard? Me cutting some pines down so I can get more light on my hayfield. Does that merit a conditional use permit? I don't want to have to be in here bothering you saying, look, I'm going to cut some more pine trees down. I don't think I need a conditional. We have to try to convince you this. Again, just go back to the table. If I'm following BMPs, and if I'm selling the timber, I have laws that govern that. That's the whole timber tax. And again, that's part of the whole. And then again, the last piece, I think I touched on this earlier, is just the general question of who would enforce this, who would determine that. You know, some towns have tried to use code enforcement officers. Sometimes towns are fortunate enough to have a forester. They'll have a town forester. I know many towns that do. The forester's reluctant because they do work in the town and you start running into conflicts of interest. I bid on timber on Catherine's property. I don't get it, but now I'm going to come out and inspect it on behalf of the town. You know, you get these situations, and we've all read about it in the Citizen, the Concord Monitor. We don't want to go there. So again, I guess those were some just fundamental mechanical things that I think could be pretty easily fixed if you just said, look, it's a permitted use, you got to follow BMPs. It gets you off the hook if you have an issue with someone that isn't following BMPs. 271-2214, that's Dred's number, that's the Forest Ranger's number, and they do respond. When I did my timber sale in 07, I would go out and on my intent to cut, there'd be business cards from the ranger and the timber tax. And I don't know if they were picking on me because of what I do, but I talk to others and I go to other log landings and you see them, they get out and look at it.
The Rangers are good.
And they were at my property and they said, Jason, you've got a wet spot out back. You know, our property slopes and it gets kind of wet down there. And they said, we were watching that. Abby did a good job. And he says, you were fine. So anyway, I'm starting to ramble, and that's always a problem I have.
I think that was very helpful.
A lot of useful
I think it's
information.
very, very, I think what you told us tonight is very helpful.
Well, good.
Ideas.
again, I
We're
appreciate.
glad you're a citizen of Tilton, let's put it that way.
That's right, I pay taxes.
So if we get in trouble, we
Well-
have you. Does anyone on the planning board have any questions of Jason?
I have a comment,
Yes,
or maybe a question. With your position with the Timberlands Association, and you stated it's towns don't need to regulate their wetlands as far as logging goes because DES is involved. If you walk on the School Street site, you'll see where DES totally failed us.
he got written up for that. He, Bert Von Dorman, I think, wrote it.
But I think that was because the Rangers insisted.
Well, and.
I was up there several times during the operation, contacting DES saying, listen, it's not good, it's really bad. And I think, and it's not to fault DES. I mean, the problem goes back to the legislature. They're not funded properly, neither are any of our state agencies. And they just don't have the staffing. They can't be there as often as they need to be. We had, what, three timber cuts going on at the same time in town. This one has ended and there's two more. Yes, there's one on 132, this
I
one down
think we
at
had
3,
four,
we had
because
School
of
Street.
Mansville and
Well, that one was completed. That was a clear cut.
the one in
But-
on the Sanberton line that
Yeah,
connected
that's-
with Autumn Drive and
Yeah,
the
132
Johanna Oliver
School
was
Street.
132.
and here, and this one was the worst. Just absolutely the worst.
And
And what we're left with in that brook is unbelievable.
I guess, you know,
So
I can't make.
the problem is on the local level, we can look at that as health officer. Whenever there's a suspicion that a brook like that is being polluted, I can go as health officer. I don't need this ordinance to do that, which is what I was doing on that property. I haven't gone down to this one because I don't have any complaints like that. I had a complaint on 132, so I went and looked, and he was great. I don't know the logger, but he was excellent. He recognized everything and fixed it immediately and took some stuff down he didn't need to. But my point is, with DES understaffed and underfunded, how should a town manage their wetlands? Because a lot of wetlands lead to major rivers.
Yeah.
The Tag Aquifer supplies of drinking water of 3 communities, we're one of them.
I mean, and again,
If we
wetlands.
can't regulate our wetlands.
Yeah, wetlands serve a function, there's no question. I think, you know, if there's a wetlands violation, or, you know, you have a situation where it's kind of spiraling as it did up on Autumn Drive, you call DES, you have to do it, put the call in. The rangers, I have found to be very responsive. And the rangers have the same regulatory authority as DES. In the RSA, I think it's 227J, the forest rangers can write up wetlands violations. They like to have DES do it,
Yes, they do.
because DES has a bigger club.
Yep.
But now, with our repeat offender, I call it my frequent flyer club, their club has gotten a lot bigger, particularly for some of these cats that just don't get it. And so, I think, you know, I think what we're starting to see, and it is just starting, and this is something that, again, we pushed for 4 years ago. It took the state, we got it passed. The wheels of government, as you know, can move slowly in Concord. But I think we're gonna start to see that club get bigger with the Rangers. And they will respond. They're out there. And as an association, we advocated for additional rangers and got 2 additional rangers in 2000. 4 years ago, when there was a pretty dramatic change in the legislature and there was attempts to slash and burn, we fought like heck to keep what we had, and we kept some rangers and advocated, and the timber tax assessor in particular was a position that was on the block, and we called out the troops and kept that, as well as extension funding. So there are eyes out there. I think the rangers are, personally, if I saw something, I'd call a ranger.
towards the middle of it, I discovered that that's exactly,
that's the way to go.
exactly the way to go. They were much more responsive, much more, almost immediate.
And they're charged with that, because, you know, they know where the sales are going, because they get copies of the intent to cuts. And they know who the operators are.
They do, they know the players.
They know who they are, and like I said, they know it, and so, anyway, that's, you know, if you have a question, that's who you turn to. And they're the experts. They can look at that and say, you know what, that pull cord doesn't look pretty, but it's functioning. I'm not seeing, you know, that's the other thing, is we're not making microchips. Sometimes you go in the woods, and we do a class, timber harvesting law class. We do this in conjunction with Cooperative Extension for municipal officials. And we love to take them out and go onto an active timber sale. And they'll look and they'll say, geez, look at all the brush down, and this looks messy. And then you say, all right, well, let's take a step back. Look at your brook. Do you see sediment in it? No. All right. That's, you know, you've got to be results oriented.
Well, Dari and I went out to Cole's parking lot because you could see the end of that timber cut on School Street. And that's basically what Dari and I said was, well, it doesn't look very nice and it looks messy, but we don't see any infraction of many rules, timberland rules or regulations. So that's a perfect example of it.
You got to be, yeah, I mean, it's hard, you know, as people, we like things neat and tidy. And you go out in timber sales, they can look messy, but again, you have to look at what's in that brook.
Yeah.
And, you know, am I seeing the erosion? If I see the skidder come out and it's wallowing in mud, that's a problem, and they should know better. And that's a violation. That's when you call up the ranger and say, we have a dredge and fill violation, we want you to take a look at it. But again, it's looking at the stream. I mean, at the end of the day, we all know the history of land use. If we can keep the blacktop and concrete off it, trees will grow. And so how do you keep the blacktop off and make it affordable to grow trees?
So does that mean if you get, 3 inches of rain in 2 days, that they probably shouldn't be out there logging tomorrow? I mean,
In most instances, no, and depending on the site, I've seen, you go up in the Ossipes where it's really sandy, and they'll operate, if it's raining and the site's well drained, you can operate, but I'll tell you, talk to anyone that buys logs, any sawmill or paper mill that buys logs, and they'll tell you a rainstorm, they start to sweat it, because most operators, and we teach this in our classes and our workshops, not only is it bad for the environment, it's bad for business. Running in mud is tough on your machine. You create crappy wood. I mean, no sawmill wants to saw a log that's been pulled through a mud bath. Not good for the blades. And it's just your operating costs. You burn a lot more diesel. It's tougher on your equipment. So most operators in the state, you got bad apples out there, just like there's bad roofers and bad auto mechanics. But if you park, they know, park their equipment. So, Dari knows how to find me. I'll leave my business card. I literally live 7 miles away. I'd be happy to, as you work on this issue, if you give me a call, I'd be happy to provide you my thoughts. And Dari knows how to find me. You guys know how to find me.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been
Thanks.
very informative.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Jason, good
Have a
to
good
see you.
evening.
See ya.
Moving right along. Is that for you, the overhead projector?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people aren't feeling great. I'm more than happy to skip it if you want, but I was gonna maybe pull up the land use website and try and print off some documents, and maybe hopefully people would say, oh, now I see why it's not working for me, so I can do that if you
Is
want.
this for Jane's benefit?
No, I can
Couldn't
pull,
print
I
them home.
I mean,
can't print
yeah,
from home, but I can come in here and get them and pull them up.
I guess.
But I'm not the
yeah.
only person.
Yeah.
I talked to somebody on zoning, they can't either. That's why I said, you know, there's an issue somewhere, I don't know what
Yeah.
it is.
I mean, I don't know, I know maybe, I don't know if all the members who've had issues are here tonight, if, again, I'll leave it up to the board whether you want me to go forward with this or not.
Anybody feel you need to go forward with it?
All right, so, maybe let's just, work on the printing issue, but I guess just quickly, rather than getting up to the computer, I'll remind you, we have the website that you can access if you're on, well, you guys all know how to get to the website by now. Google Chrome is the way to, seems to be the better way to go.
I don't need it.
Wait, actually, can I just quickly ask people, who's having trouble printing here? Anyone here tonight having trouble printing? Okay, so,
Well, that was only today,
okay,
after I
I
talked to
did in
those
the
other
beginning,
people.
but.
you got it now?
Yeah, 'cause I don't
Okay.
use Chrome.
Okay, so I guess let's work on the printing issues. If you could just call me, we'll work on them one-on-one. Maybe folks come, maybe anyone's having to stop in the office sometime, we can just go through it. And then the other thing I guess I'll add is you may have seen that I'm working on a online application there. I'm not directing people to it yet because I think it's necessary that the planning board approve any forms that are actually being utilized. But at some point, if you guys want to take a look at that, at some point I will bring it before the board for your approval so that we can start having people fill out applications online and email them in.
Is it under forms or something on the website?
It says online application, and then there's a tab underneath it that says under construction, how to create your abutters list. Because it's possible to create your abutters list without coming into the office. And I think that would be real helpful for people. But it's a little bit of a process. But again, I think it's worth it to read the directions, go through it, rather than coming all the way down to town hall if that's inconvenient for someone.
Okay. So if anybody's having problems, we'll
Just check with me, yeah, and yeah, go from there.
all right. Our next meeting is what, October
14?
I guess
14th?
so, yeah.
So we did get an email saying that we needed an extra 10-7.
Well, I wanna make sure that people get, I think before we go exactly through the zoning amendments, if
Yeah.
everybody go through them very carefully. Has everybody done that?
No.
Go, not the amendments, go through the
I
ordinance.
mean, go through the
Oh, I was gonna
ordinance.
say, I
Yeah.
haven't seen it.
No,
Now it's
no.
for amendment?
No,
Yeah, I haven't seen
no,
it.
that's not what I was I'm sorry, I don't feel well and that's showing up.
Oh.
The zoning ordinances, has everybody had a chance to go through them very carefully and jot down anything that you think might be a problem? Can we do that realistically by the 14th, so we can have a fruitful discussion and work on that? That gives us quite a bit of time, should be able to do it by then. Maybe. Dari, would you send out reminders?
Yeah, yeah.
Put a ding on their email so they'll hear it every time they go in. All right, so please, let's put that on.
The October 14th
Yeah.
agenda, okay.
All right,
I have a little list of no, that's right, never mind. I'll have a list ready,
Awesome.
yeah, well, I have some things
I may even
that I
email it
have
out.
too, so,
Okay.
okay.
I think it's, yeah, a lot of people aren't feeling well tonight, so let's wrap it up.
All right,
Right.
the next is a
I
review
guess
of the
the-
September 9th minutes. Make a motion to bring them to the floor, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Has everybody had a chance to review them?
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
what do you got?
Do you have some?
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't find any.
just, I don't know I didn't know where to put it, but I recused myself from the case.
So,
Should be in there.
Okay,
And then I sat myself back at the table.
Okay.
after that.
Definitely needs to be in there.
Yeah.
All right. All right, I make a motion to accept the
Oh,
minutes.
wait,
Oh,
He's
it's
not done.
no, not done. I thought Bob requested the continuation, that was all. I wasn't 100% sure. Mr. Callahan, it's in Mr. Pyra, at the bottom of page one.
no, so you got, no, because you're the one who requested it,
Okay.
right? Because we said, I recall
Oh, yeah,
saying,
yeah, yeah.
I suggest we offer the applicant an opportunity to request it, and then, Ms. Harvey is actually the one who made the motion, according to my records.
Yeah, I think that is what happened.
All right. I see that I put an extra space on where it says on page 1, PB case 14-14. Chairman Alden, oh, did I steal yours, Christine?
No.
Chairman Alden said that, and then there's a space between
Oh.
them.
I wasn't gonna take that up, but
I
didn't
will
wanna-
get that out of there.
All right, well, please do that.
It's 20 the merits, by the way.
All right, anything else?
Christine,
You have something, Christine?
No,
All right,
I didn't
Let
want
us
to.
down.
may I go back to my original, I make a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
And then we have an abstinence.
who abstained?
Judy's abstinent.
Oh, okay.
All right, we have no correspondence whatsoever. Also put on the next agenda, master plan,
Okay,
ready for
Review
public
session.
hearing. Reviews to be ready for public hearing,
okay.
okay?
So you're saying, at the next meeting, we should have the plan ready for review, or we should deliberate on what we need to deliberate on to the.
For the master plan?
Yeah,
Well, we have two things. We have, and neither one is anything that's gonna cause a lot of deliberation.
okay,
I don't think there'll be any objection or whatever. I think it'll go quite smoothly.
okay,
But we'll get those firmed up so that we can have the public hearing
okay.
and get that out.
All right.
Do you have a copy of the draft?
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, how do I know I have the right one? You know, I wasn't here when it all came
That's a
together, so I,
problem. Yeah.
The bottom of the last.
So who has the right one?
well,
And I
have.
understand that because.
I
have a folder.
have the right one, I believe.
Okay, I have a folder that Gus gave to me and said, here's the current state of the master plan. So,
I'm only laughing because I know how convoluted that must be.
so I
It's
have
so
that
long.
folder.
And
And-
that's and she gave each of us a copy of the final amendments. So the folder you have should be it. I
Yeah, I'm not-
have a compilation of those from a folder. I will bring it,
Okay.
you can check to make sure that they're the same.
So where is the draft that was approved at the public hearing?
That's it.
Which is it?
The one that he has in the folder that Gus gave him and that I have.
How can we be certain it's the one?
I'm certain that I have it because I wrote
Okay.
on the top, final draft.
Can you get that to Dari so he can find
can.
it in his computer? You must have it in the computer.
Yeah,
I can do that,
somewhere.
right?
Because I'd like a copy of it
Yeah.
to read before the meeting.
Before the meeting, otherwise we're gonna waste time at the.
Right.
Looking at it again.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No opposition to it?
That was quick.
An hour.
That Jason is such a nice man. That was quick and easy.
This
Where does he
What?
think?
logging
Yep.
decision come from? You get it.
Oh,
Something that,
I mean, it's kind of all over the place right now. Jason actually sent it to me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just curious.
And, but there was a lot of discussion on Plan Link about it.
Should I hit stop on this?
Interesting discussion.
Yeah, hit stop.
Stop.
Did you turn the camera off?
No.
I'm gonna get a
Stop
little
on this.
bathroom.
What's that?
I shouldn't have.
Oh, thank you.
What do I hit stop?
Did you just hit stop and start?
Or something.
I don't know.